I'm Juliet. I hope you're really well. This offering is a yin class. Yin yoga is a slower, more restorative version of yoga. We'll be holding the poses for around 3 minutes. In a normal yin class, it's between 3 and 10, but this time is limited, so it's going to be 3 today. We're going to be focusing on the stomach and spleen meridians and nourishing those organs. I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on during the practice. But before we start, I just wanted to make sure that you have your yin toolkit ready like I do here. A couple of blocks are really useful if you need them. If you don't have them, then just a couple of big books, encyclopedias, dictionaries, whatever you've got lying around the house. I've also got some kind of foam blocks here, but you could use a couple of towels folded up. Likewise, a couple of blankets folded up, as many blankets as you can have actually, they're really, really useful. And I've got my bolster here, so grab that if you have one, and if you don't, pillows or cushions will work just as well. So let's begin by just focusing on the mindfulness of the breath. So closing the eyes, getting comfortable, taking whatever seat you need to, so kneeling, cross-legged, maybe putting something underneath your sit bones, and then closing the eyes. And then just feeling into the body, maybe rolling the shoulders back and down, placing the hands somewhere where you won't fidget with them, and just noticing the breath. And often when we are told to notice something or watch the breath, the instinct is to launch into it and suddenly find ourselves embodying that fully and changing it and altering as a result. But here, that's not the focus. It's just to observe and to almost stand back from. So stand back from it, see it how it is, notice what's going on, rather than forcing it or altering it or changing it to sound or to be in some way how you think it should be. So the breath is a really good indicator of how we are feeling. Often the shape of the breath can really reflect what's going on for us and in our bodies. So the invitation here is just to feel into the body and to observe the breath. Just finding a little bit of space, creating some space, creating some consciousness. We often walk around so disconnected from ourselves. This is just a little bit of time to connect. Just parking to one side any thoughts, unhooking from thought, being driven by thought, just watching the breath, the inhalations and the exhalations, something that's always constant there for us to focus on. Something that's always changing and moving. No two breaths are the same. Cultivating that mindfulness of the breath. Just another few breaths like this before we go into our first pose. So slowly start to bring the awareness back into the room, opening the eyes. And I'm going to come into our first pose, which is a wide-kneed child's pose with a twist. So I suggest the knees being about a mat width apart, and then sending the seat onto the heels, and then bringing the torso down in between the legs and walking the hands forward. Then taking the right hand and feeding it, the right arm underneath the left armpit, so that the right arm is kind of perpendicular to the torso, and then wrapping the left arm around you. Maybe you can grab hold of the right inner thigh. If you can't, maybe you just rest the top of the left hand onto the back of the body on the right hand side. So we're trying to twist the chest open towards the sky,
and then we'll just surrender into the shape, so we don't need to force or change anything.
Now you can either stay here, but if you're finding this a little bit tricky on the tops of the feet, then I suggest rolling a towel really tightly, or a blanket, and placing it underneath the tops of the feet. So it gives your ankles a little bit of flexion here. So it means that you're not pressing on the ankles. Some people have stiffness around the ankles. That's one nice thing to do that makes child's pose a bit more comfortable for some of you. But also, sometimes you see people's hips hovering quite high above the heels. So here you want to bring the ground up to the seat, as it were. So maybe placing some padding in between the feet and the seat before you come down. Okay. And then we're going to stay here for about 3 minutes. Surrendering into the shape,
continuing that mindfulness of the breath. The stomach and spleen meridians are vital for helping to nourish the stomach and spleen organs. They are the organs of nourishment for the body. Of course, the stomach is the first place that food is contained within the body. It's the first organ of digestion. And then from there, it sends nutrients into the spleen, and then the spleen creates blood from all these nutrients and sends the nutrients into the bloodstream so that we can benefit from them. So it's really important to have good health of these particular organs. And this position really stretches and stresses the inner thighs, the groin here, by having the widening child's pose, where the stomach and spleen meridians lie in the body. And also the twist here around the abdominals nourishes those stomach channels. So it's a great pose. So we're done on this side now. So slowly take the left palm, pressing into it, into the mat, and we'll just go straight onto the other side. We don't have much time today. So we'll go straight onto the other side, sliding that left arm underneath the right armpit, feeding it through a little bit more so you get a nice stretch on the shoulder as well. So many benefits of yin. And then with the right hand, reach it back behind you. See if you can grab hold of the left inner thigh. Otherwise, just placing the top of the right hand, on your back. We're just going to stay here for a few minutes. Maybe you might feel at this point that you can take some of the padding away from underneath your seat. Whatever feels comfortable for you. Just make some adjustments if you wish before you find some stillness. But it is important to find that stillness. So the ingredients of yin are coming to a shape, finding your shape, then coming to that appropriate edge. So feeling not uncomfortable in the shape, but just coming where you feel the muscles and the tissues in the body, just feeling a little bit stressed, but no pain. So in yoga, no sharp pains should occur whatsoever. If it feels painful, then you lay off. So coming to that appropriate edge, and then to stay in that particular shape for a prolonged period of time. And that's when your tissues start to stretch and release, and they get lubricated while we're in a yin posture, and it's really beneficial for the body. So we're just going to have 1 more minute left here in our wide knee child's pose. Watching the breath, noticing the fluctuations of the mind, but not getting attached to them. That's the importance of a yoga practice, and that's why we do it. So start to deepen the breath as we come out of the pose, bringing that right palm down, via the face, pressing into it. Now, we've been stretching the inner thigh muscles here and the tissues here, so we're not going to suddenly engage them. So the kind of thing to do is with the hands, lift the knees and bring them in towards the centre line. And then rest in a normal child's pose just for a couple of breaths. So bringing the forehead down to the mat, allowing the back to round and the shoulders to round. It's a really nice counter pose. So it's important to take a little bit of time in counter poses so that the body can recalibrate and the nervous system can come back to some kind of equilibrium before we take the next pose. So the next pose is called dragon. I'm not sure why, it just is. So it's really useful to have some blocks or props that can help elevate the ground towards you. So you're going to take the right leg forward between the hands, the right foot rather, and then sink the hips low. And then we're going to come to balance, sinking the hips low and balancing the hands, or rather pressing into the hands either side of the foot. So your hands are kind of aligned with the front foot. And you're pressing into the blocks, sinking the hips, and then lifting the chest, and then sinking into this left hip flexor. So the target area is this left hip flexor where you're going to get a nice stretch here in the tissues, because your stomach and spleen meridians lie through the inner leg and they come all the way up here before they come in towards the body. And you're also stretching out the front side of the body as well, stimulating along those same meridian lines. Now, whether you believe in Chinese meridians and things like that, if you're a runner, this is a fantastic stretch for you, because our hip flexors really do feel it when we're running, and also when you're sitting at your desk all day. If you're someone that works, that has a job that requires them to do that, we're sitting in that compression in the hip flexor, and it's really good to really extend it out, and so really lengthen it here. So it may feel a little bit overwhelming, a little bit like, whoa, that's quite intense, but you can always send the hips back a little bit. You can always bring the floor up to you and work it up even higher. Or if you don't have blocks with you, you can always lean onto that front thigh with the hands, maybe like this. But there is an effortlessness, a weightlessness we're trying to achieve here. So I'm creating a little tripod between my two hands and my feet. So I'm evenly distributing the weight of my torso, so I'm not dumping into the hands or dumping into this right leg. Just having another minute here. Try not to round the shoulders, but you can still feel relaxed. We don't have to sit rigid and upright. It's not a vinyasa class. And it really isn't about the shape. It's about the sensation. So as long as we're getting a nice stretch and sensation into this target area, rather than any kind of sharp pain, then we can stay here. Watch the breath. Notice how the mind wanders when things get a little bit difficult or more challenging. Notice if you're holding on to any tension anywhere. I know that I feel like I can release a little bit more here. Observe the breath. Are you holding on to any tension in any other places in the body? Maybe in the jaw? Is the tongue stuck to the roof of the mouth? So our time is up here. We're going to switch sides, so bring the hips back a little bit. And just maybe rub this area, bring some life back into it. If it's feeling a bit numb or under stress. And then bring that right knee down, and then step the left foot between the hands. And again, we're going to sink the hips on this side. Now, if you felt a little bit of a pinching in the hip here, I can show you something you can do. You can roll up a blanket and just create a bit more space here in the hip. Putting a blanket there, so that allows you to sink the hips a bit more, but the torso will rest on the blanket, creating more space. Notice we're often
a lot stiffer or looser on one side than the other, because we are all asymmetrical. No human in the world is symmetrical. So we'll always feel a little bit different on either side. So just notice that. And notice if the body's resisting in any way, and what can you do to make it more comfortable. You can have little warning signs in the body. The breath is the first place that we can sense discomfort, or maybe it can be something as subtle as the flickering of an eye, or a little twitch somewhere, telling us that this is not that good, or that something is happening and it does feel okay. But remember, we shouldn't be feeling any pain. Must reinforce that. So maybe can you afford to sink the hips even lower? I like to arch my back naturally. I know that's not good for some. So bring the torso forward along this left leg. If you feel like you're dumping into the lower back too much, you can always walk the hands forward as well. And always grab a bolster or a cushion as well to lean on. Sometimes that's quite nice if you want to really rest the arms, or if your arms are particularly tired. So our time's almost done here, just a couple more breaths. Enjoying that nice stretch on the front side of the right thigh. You notice the props just get everywhere in yin. And then slowly bring the hips back. Return that left knee down and just take a couple of breaths, rest in child's pose before we take the last pose of the class. Forehead down to the mat. Arms can be alongside the body like this. You can round the shoulders, or you can activate the arms a little bit. Placing the palms down, forehead to the mat. Continuing to breathe. Notice as the breath changed its shape, altered at all since coming out of the pose. And all that wonderful new blood and qi, we call it qi in Chinese medicine, qi, that energy flow within the body, or the qi rushes to the different parts of the body once we've stressed and strained those parts. We then moved back into a slightly more comfortable pose, and the qi moves into those areas where we had stopped the blood flow. So it feels really nice. Should feel really, really nice. And then finally, for our last pose, I'm going to come into a straddle, or they call it dragonfly in yin. So I tend to round my lower back, as do a lot of people, when I sit like this, upright with nothing behind me. So I'm going to sit under something low. It could be a blanket or a low block. I'm going to feel like my sit bones are almost coming off. So that I've got to forward tilt the pelvis. So forward tilt the pelvis will really help reduce the rounding of the lower back. And then I'm going to take the legs as wide as I feel like I can. And then the super flexible people can bring their chest all the way down to the mat. I can't. I can just about bring my forearms, but I do tend to round the back. So what I'm going to do is get all of my props and do a makeshift tower, which is really, really fun. Lifting the ground up towards me, and take my blocks, do it like that, and rest my chest on here, and that feels really nice. I can even rest my head on here, and the target area is the inside of the legs. So we started stimulating them at the beginning of the class, and now we're really going into the inner thighs, the inner legs more deeply, where these stomach and spleen meridians lie. So the spleen is also really important for your immune system, because it's the site where the white blood cells trap organisms. So spleen health is really, really important for the body. And also when your spleen chi is in balance, then we can feel a little bit more coherent and less anxious, and have more equanimity in our everyday lives. So I think just we've got another minute here.
Observing the breath, noticing it, creating that distance between you and thoughts.
If you need to make adjustments, do. If you feel you're too high up or too low down, you need to take more props, by all means do. You can always take this class and pause the video and make the postures last for longer, so maybe 5 minutes if you take out your timer and do this. I do definitely suggest that. The longer you stay in the pose, the more benefit you get out of it.
Notice how the heart's
Rate may have slowed down a bit. Yin really stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, so you usually come out from a yin class feeling a little bit calmer, more relaxed. But it is also a challenge to achieve that in many ways. So our time here is up. Again, like with the child's pose, we're going to bring the legs together slowly using our hands so as not to suddenly engage the inner legs that will be feeling a bit vulnerable. And then coming to your Shavasana for as long as you can. I suggest 5 minutes. I'm going to leave you here, palms facing up. Maybe you want to take a couple of jumpers, because we often feel a little cold, our temperature in the body drops during yin. So maybe wear a jumper, some socks, maybe even a blanket. And then lie, palms facing up, nothing to do, just rest for as long as you can here. Thank you for joining me today. I do hope that you find the time to take a bit more time for your yin practice. And I'll see you soon. Namaste.